The scent of pine and wild heather clung to the evening air as I trudged through the dense forest, each step heavier than the last. Twilight was rapidly fading, the last amber streaks of sunlight filtering through ancient trees, whose shadows stretched like elongated fingers across the forest floor. My breath came in small, visible puffs against the autumn chill, and the sound of my footsteps on fallen leaves seemed impossibly loud in the gathering silence. I hadn't meant to wander this deep into the woods. What had started as a simple hike to clear my head after another disastrous job interview had turned into something else entirely when I'd spotted an unusual flowering plant just off the trail. One distraction had led to another, and now the marked path was long behind me, swallowed by the wilderness that seemed to grow more imposing with each passing minute. Stupid, 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 I muttered, pushing a strand of pale blonde hair from my face. The golden locks, which my mother had always called my crown of light, now felt like a beacon in the darkening forest. Something I desperately wanted to hide. Being visible had never served me well. Not in the small town I'd fled, where everyone knew about the girl whose father had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Not in the city, where I'd spent 3 years trying to blend into the concrete and glass, only to be laid off when the company downsized. My fingers instinctively reached for the small silver compass hanging from a chain around my neck. My father's parting gift before he vanished into these very woods 10 years ago. "The needle always points to where you belong, Alice," he'd said with that gentle smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. The compass had never worked, not in any conventional way, but I'd kept it close ever since. A talisman against the loneliness that had become my constant companion. The needle now spun wildly, the way it always did when I was lost. Not just geographically, but in life. At 25, I had thought I would have found my place by now. But instead, I was literally and metaphorically adrift, with darkness closing in. That was when I heard it. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the earth beneath my feet. I froze, my breath catching painfully in my throat. The forest had gone completely silent. No birds called, no insects chirped. There was only the sound of my thundering heartbeat and that continuous warning growl. Slowly I turned, every instinct screaming at me to run even as my feet remained rooted to the spot. At the edge of the small clearing stood a wolf. No, not just a wolf. This creature was massive, its shoulders coming up to what would have been my chest, with fur as black as midnight, and eyes that glowed like molten gold in the dim light. It watched me with an intelligence that sent ice down my spine, its massive head lowered in warning. I had heard rumors, of course. Everyone in the region had. Stories of unusually large wolves that roamed these forests, protecting their territory with vicious determination. Stories I had dismissed as local legend, meant to keep hikers on marked trails and children from wandering too far from home, but the beast before me was terrifyingly real, and I was trespassing in its domain. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words escaping unbidden. "I didn't mean to intrude. I'm lost." The wolf's growl ceased abruptly. It cocked its head, those golden eyes narrowing as though in confusion or surprise. For a moment, we simply stared at one another, prey and predator locked in a strange tableau of mutual assessment. Then, to my astonishment, the massive creature turned slightly, looking over its shoulder as if beckoning. The compass at my throat suddenly grew warm against my skin. When I glanced down, the erratic spinning of its needle had stopped, pointing directly at the wolf with unwavering certainty. Something in my chest shifted, a recognition I couldn't name or understand. Before I could process what was happening, more shapes emerged from the trees, wolves of varying sizes and colors, all unnaturally large, all watching me with the same eerie intelligence. They formed a loose semicircle behind their black leader, and I realized with a sinking feeling that escape was impossible. Whatever fate awaited me would be determined by these creatures, and whatever hierarchy governed their behavior. "Please," I said again, unsure why I was speaking to them as though they could understand. "I just want to find my way back to the trail." The black wolf took a step forward, and then another, its massive paws silent on the forest floor. I closed my eyes, certain that those powerful jaws would close around my throat at any moment. Instead, I felt something like hot breath against my trembling hand. When I dared to look, The wolf was inches away, its muzzle nearly touching my fingers. It inhaled deeply, and a shudder passed through its powerful frame. The golden eyes widened, and the creature took a step back, as though shocked. A sound escaped it. Not a growl this time, but something more complex, almost like a word. Then, between one heartbeat and the next, the forest around me seemed to ripple like heat waves over summer asphalt. The black wolf's form blurred, elongated, and where the beast had stood now crouched a man. Naked, powerful, with the same midnight black hair and piercing golden eyes. Behind him, other wolves were transforming as well, the air filled with the unsettling sound of bones reshaping and muscles realigning. I stumbled backward, a scream building in my throat that never emerged. My back hit the rough bark of a tree, and still I tried to retreat, as if I could somehow push myself through the solid trunk to escape what my mind couldn't comprehend. "You!" the man who had been the black wolf said, his voice deep and resonant, carrying both wonder and command. "What are you doing in my territory? How did you find us?" Words failed me. The world tilted precariously, darkness encroaching at the edges of my vision. The last thing I registered before consciousness slipped away was the expression on the man's face. Not anger or threat, but a hunger so profound it looked like salvation. I awoke to warmth and the scent of wood smoke. For a blissful moment, I thought perhaps I'd dreamed it all. The wolves, the transformations, the man with eyes like liquid gold. Then my vision cleared, and I found myself staring up at a ceiling of rough-hewn timbers, a fur blanket tucked around me on what felt like a surprisingly comfortable bed. "She's awake," a female voice said from somewhere nearby. I turned my head to see a woman with copper-colored hair watching me from a chair near a crackling fireplace. She was beautiful in a severe way, her posture rigid and her eyes, a warm brown, thankfully human, assessing me with open suspicion. "How do you feel?" she asked, making no move to approach. "Like I've lost my mind," I answered honestly, my voice hoarse. "Or like I'm still unconscious, and this is some bizarre dream my oxygen-deprived brain has conjured up." A sound that might have been a reluctant laugh escaped her. "You're not dreaming, and your mind is intact, if a bit overwhelmed. You fainted after seeing a wolf turn into a man," I said, pushing myself into a sitting position. "Several wolves, actually. So you'll forgive me if I'm having trouble accepting any of this as reality." The woman's expression tightened. "Reality is seldom what humans expect it to be," she said cryptically. "I'm Mira. You're in the home of King Nathaniel, our alpha." "King," I repeated weakly. "The wolf, the man, with the black hair?" She nodded, her gaze never leaving my face. "He has questions for you. Many of us do. But he wanted to ensure you were comfortable first." Her tone suggested she didn't entirely agree with this consideration. "Where am I? What are you people?" I clutched the fur blanket tighter, suddenly aware that I was wearing different clothes, a soft tunic and loose pants that weren't my own. "You're in the heart of Black Crest territory," Mira answered. "As for what we are," she paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "We are shifters, werewolves in human mythology. We live apart from your world, protecting our kind and our secrets." The door opened before I could respond, and he entered, the man from the forest, now dressed in simple dark clothes that emphasized the powerful build of his body. He seemed to fill the room with his presence alone. Those golden eyes found mine immediately, and something electric passed between us, raising the hair on my arms. "Leave us, Mira," he commanded without looking away from me. The woman rose, hesitating. "Your Majesty, the council is waiting. They expect to be informed." "They will wait," he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "I need to speak with her alone." Mira bowed slightly and left, though not without a final, searching look at me that contained both warning and curiosity. When the door closed behind her, the man, King Nathaniel, apparently, moved closer, stopping at the foot of the bed. Up close, I could see that what I had taken for ordinary human eyes were anything but. The irises truly were the color of molten gold, with vertical pupils that expanded and contracted like a cat's as he studied me. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice gentler than it had been with Mira, but but no less commanding. "Alice," I answered, finding unexpected strength in speaking my own name. "Alice Bennett." "Alice," he repeated, as though testing the sound of it. "Do you know what you are?" "Human," I said automatically. "Just an ordinary human who took a wrong turn on a hiking trail." He shook his head slowly, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "No, Alice Bennett. You are many things, but ordinary is not among them. The moment you crossed into my territory, every wolf in my pack felt it, a disturbance in the energy that protects our borders. When I caught your scent," he trailed off, his expression intense. "Do you know how long I have searched for you?" Fear and confusion warred with a strange, unwelcome sense of recognition. "You haven't been searching for me. You don't even know me. I know your essence," he countered. "I would recognize it anywhere, in any form. My Luna." "Your what?" I shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. "My mate, the one destined to stand beside me as queen of this pack." He reached out, not touching me, but extending his hand as if in offering. "For years, I've sent scouts throughout the human world, seeking the one who carries the scent that matches the emptiness inside me. And here you are, wandering into my forest, as though led by fate itself." I stared at his outstretched hand, then back at his face, searching for signs of madness or deception. I found neither, only a certainty that shook me to my core. "You have the wrong person," I insisted, my voice trembling. "I'm not anyone's Luna. I'm just Alice, and I need to go home." His hand dropped, and something like pain flashed across his features. "Where is home for you, Alice Bennett?" "Because your scent tells me it's here, with me. With us. The connection between Alpha and Luna cannot be denied or mistaken." My fingers found the compass at my throat, clutching it like a lifeline. "I have an apartment, a life. It's not much, but it's mine. And has it ever felt right? Have you ever truly belonged there?" His words struck a chord so deep I flinched. No, I had never belonged. Not in the small town with its whispers and judgments, not in the anonymous city with its concrete indifference. I had been adrift for as long as I could remember, searching for something I couldn't name. But this? Werewolves and fated mates and hidden kingdoms in the forest? It was too fantastical, too terrifying to accept. "I want to leave," I said, forcing firmness into my voice. "Whatever you believe I am, I didn't ask for it. I don't want it." King Nathaniel's expression hardened, though the hunger in his eyes remained. "The forest is dangerous at night, especially for one who carries a scent as powerful as yours. You will stay until morning at least. Then, if you still wish to return to your human life, I will personally escort you to the edge of our territory." Before I could argue, he turned toward the door. "Rest. Mira will bring you food. Tomorrow you will meet the council and learn more about who and what you truly are. After that, the choice will be yours." As he reached for the door handle, he paused, looking back at me over his shoulder. "But know this, Alice Bennett, in all the centuries of our kind's existence, no true Luna has ever rejected her Alpha. The call of the bond is too powerful to deny forever." With that, he was gone, leaving me alone with a whirlwind of impossible thoughts and the unsettling sensation that the compass around my neck was growing warmer by the second, its needle pointing steadfastly in the direction King Nathaniel had gone. Sleep eluded me that night, despite the surprising comfort of the bed. Moonlight streamed through a small window, casting silver patterns across the wooden floor as I paced, the fur blanket wrapped around my shoulders like armor. Every shadow seemed alive with possibilities I wasn't ready to face. Every sound from beyond the thick walls a reminder that I was surrounded by creatures that shouldn't exist. Werewolves. The word itself felt ridiculous in my mind, something belonging to late-night horror films and teenage fantasy novels, not to reality, and certainly not to my carefully constructed if underwhelming life. Yet I had seen the transformation with my own eyes, had felt the undeniable presence of something other in King Nathaniel's gaze. King Nathaniel. Even thinking his name sent an involuntary shiver through me, a reaction I couldn't fully classify as fear. There had been something in the way he looked at me, Not just hunger or possession, but recognition, as though he had been searching for me specifically. Not just some abstract mate his instincts demanded. The memory of his words haunted me. "Do you know how long I have searched for you?" As though I were a missing piece of himself. Something vital he had been forced to live without. The intensity of his certainty was almost as disturbing as the transformation I had witnessed. I clutched my father's compass, which hadn't stopped pointing in the direction Nathaniel had gone. Had my father known about this place? About these beings? Is that why he had vanished without a trace? Leaving nothing but this broken compass and a lifetime of questions? A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Before I could respond, Mira entered, carrying a tray laden with food, roasted meat, bread, and what looked like fresh berries, despite the autumn season. "You should eat," she said, setting the tray on a small table near the bed. "Tomorrow will require strength." I eyed both her and the food warily. "Is this where you tell me that once I eat the food of the fairy kingdom, I can never leave?" A smile flickered across her face, there and gone in an instant. "This isn't a fairy tale, Alice Bennet. The rules that bind us are far older and more complex than those stories humans tell themselves." She gestured to the food. "This is simply nourishment, nothing more." Hunger won over suspicion, and I sat at the table, taking a cautious bite of the bread. It was delicious. Hearty and slightly sweet, like nothing I'd tasted before. "He's never been like this," Mira said suddenly, watching me eat. "Our king. Not in all the years I've served as his advisor." "Like what?" I asked between bites. "Hopeful." She said the word as though it were dangerous. "For centuries he has ruled with wisdom and strength, but always with a certain detachment, as though part of him were elsewhere, waiting. When he carried you into the compound tonight, there was light in him I've never seen before. My appetite suddenly diminished. I'm not what he thinks I am. I can't be." "That's not for you to decide," she replied, but her tone held more curiosity than conviction. "The bond between Alpha and Luna isn't a choice. It's recognition on the deepest level. Two souls that call to each other across time and space. That's..." I struggled for words. "Romantic, but impossible. I'm human. Just human." Mira studied me for a long moment. "Are you certain of that? Have you never experienced anything you couldn't explain? Moments of intuition that seemed beyond normal perception? Connections to the natural world that others didn't share?" I thought of the way animals had always seemed drawn to me, how I could sense shifts in weather before they occurred, how sometimes, in dreams, I ran on 4 legs instead of 2. Small things I had dismissed or rationalized throughout my life, never adding them up to anything significant. "Everyone has moments like that," I said defensively. "It doesn't make me some werewolf queen." "Luna," she corrected. "And no, not everyone experiences such things. Most humans move through their lives with their senses dulled, oblivious to the energies that flow around them." She reached out suddenly, her fingers hovering near my compass without touching it. "This artifact, it has power. Old power. Where did you get it?" "My father," I answered reluctantly. Before he disappeared, something shifted in Mira's expression. Recognition or concern, I couldn't tell which. "Disappeared where?" "In these woods, 10 years ago. The admission cost me, opening old wounds that had never fully healed. He went hiking and never returned. The search parties found nothing. Not even a footprint." Mira withdrew her hand, her posture stiffening. "What was his name?" "Robert Bennet." I watched her face carefully. "Did your people kill him?" She flinched at the accusation. "We do not kill humans who accidentally wander into our territory. We redirect them, make them forget what they've seen if necessary. If your father came this deep into our lands..." She hesitated. "I should speak with the king." "No." I caught her arm as she turned to leave. "Tell me what you know. Please. I've lived with questions for 10 years. Her eyes dropped to where my fingers gripped her sleeve, and I released her, suddenly aware of how dangerous it might be to grab a werewolf, even one in human form. "It is not my place to speak of such things," she said finally. "But I will tell His Majesty of your father. Perhaps Perhaps there are answers to be found. Her expression softened slightly. You should rest. The council meeting is at dawn, and they will not be as accommodating as the king has been. After she left, I found myself unable to touch the remaining food, my mind racing with new questions. If these werewolves didn't kill humans who trespassed, what had happened to my father? Had he somehow known about them? Was the compass, which had never worked properly for me, meant to lead him back to this place? Dawn arrived with cruel swiftness. I had just managed to fall into a fitful sleep when the door opened again, revealing not Mira, but a younger woman with warm brown skin and eyes that shifted between gray and green like forest shadows. I'm Elise, she said with a smile that seemed genuinely friendly. I've brought you clothes for the council meeting. The garments she laid out on the bed were nothing like the simple tunic and pants I'd been given the night before. Instead, there was a dress of deep blue fabric that shimmered faintly in the early morning light, along with soft leather boots and, to my surprise, a silver circlet set with a single moonstone. I can't wear this, I protested. It looks royal. Elise's smile widened. That's rather the point. You are to be presented to the council as the king's Luna. Appearances matter, especially today. But I'm not— Save your denials for the council, she interrupted gently. They'll have plenty of questions for you without adding my report of your reluctance. She touched the dress almost reverently. This belonged to the last Luna, nearly 300 years ago. The king had it preserved, waiting for the day his mate would be found. The implications of her casual mention of centuries made my head spin. How old is Nathaniel? I asked, the question escaping before I could consider its propriety. King Nathaniel, Elise corrected, though without Mira's severity, has ruled for 5 centuries. Alphas, especially those of royal bloodlines, age differently than both humans and ordinary werewolves. His power preserves him. She gave me a curious look. Hasn't anyone explained the basics to you? I only learned werewolves existed yesterday, I reminded her. So no, I haven't had time for Supernatural Creatures 101. Elise laughed, the sound bright and unexpected in the somber room. Well, you'll certainly liven things up around here. Most of the pack is half terrified of him, but you speak of the king as though he were just another man. Isn't he? I asked, even as I recalled the raw power that had emanated from him, the way his presence had filled the room and made it difficult to breathe. No, Elise said simply. He is not. And neither, I suspect, are you just another woman, whatever you may believe. She gestured to the dress. Will you wear it, or shall I find something else? Though I should warn you, rejecting this particular gift might be taken as a rejection of the king himself, which would not begin your council appearance favorably. Trapped by protocol I didn't understand, and politics I wanted no part of, I reluctantly agreed. The dress, when I put it on, fit as though made for me. The fabric light against my skin, despite its rich appearance. The circlet, which I placed awkwardly on my blonde hair after several attempts, felt cool against my forehead, the moonstone catching the light in hypnotic patterns. Perfect, Elise breathed when I emerged from behind the dressing screen. You look like you were born to it. Before I could formulate a response, the door opened again, and King Nathaniel himself entered. He froze mid-step when he saw me, his golden eyes widening with an emotion too complex to name. Leave us, he commanded Elise without looking away from me. When we were alone, he approached slowly, as though afraid I might vanish if he moved too quickly. Up close, in the clear light of morning, I could see details I had missed the night before. The faint scars that marked one side of his strong jaw, the flecks of darker amber in his golden irises, the way his black hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. You wear it well, he said, his voice lower than before, almost reverent. As I knew you would. It's just clothing, I said, fighting the urge to fidget under his intense gaze. It doesn't make me what you think I am. No, he agreed unexpectedly. The dress doesn't make you Luna. The bond between us does. He reached out, not touching me but tracing the air around my face as though memorizing its contours. Can you truly not feel it, the pull between us? the way your soul recognizes mine?" Something inside me trembled at his words, at the naked vulnerability beneath his commanding presence. There was a pull. I couldn't deny it, not to myself, but whether it was supernatural destiny or simply the magnetic attraction of his undeniable charisma, I couldn't say. "I feel something," I admitted cautiously, "but that doesn't mean I'm ready to accept all of this. Any of this, really." A smile touched his lips, transforming his severe features into something almost boyish. "You admit there is something to accept. That is a beginning." The smile faded as quickly as it had appeared. "The council awaits us. They will question you about your past, your family, how you found us. Answer truthfully, but know that many of them fear change and will look for any reason to deny what I already know to be true." "And what happens if they don't accept me as this Luna?" I asked. His expression darkened. "I am king. My word is law, but ruling wisely means considering the counsel of those who have stood by my side through centuries." He offered his arm formally. "Whatever happens in that chamber, know that I will protect you. You are safe here, Alice Bennet." Strangely, despite everything, I believed him. I placed my hand hesitantly on his offered arm, feeling the solid strength of him through the fine fabric of his sleeve. The contact sent a jolt through me, like static electricity, but warmer, deeper. From his sharp intake of breath, I knew he had felt it too. The council chamber was a large circular room with a domed ceiling, through which shafts of early morning light illuminated a massive round table carved from what appeared to be a single gigantic tree trunk. Seated around it were 12 figures of varying ages, each watching our entrance with expressions ranging from open curiosity to barely concealed hostility. "Counselors," Nathaniel's voice filled the space without effort, "I present to you Alice Bennet, who came to us through the eastern forest yesterday at dusk. As many of you already sense, she carries the essence of Luna, the mate to my alpha spirit that our people have awaited for centuries." A murmur ran through the assembled werewolves, and an elderly man with silver hair rose slowly from his seat. "Your Majesty," he said, his tone respectful but firm, "while we rejoice at the possibility that your mate has been found, we must proceed with caution. The human appears untransformed, unaware. She may carry Luna essence, but without the awakening, she remains vulnerable and temporary." His pale blue eyes shifted to me. "Humans are fragile vessels for such power." "I'm right here," I said, irritation overcoming my nervousness. "And I'd appreciate not being spoken about as though I were a package to be delivered rather than a person." Silence fell, heavy and shocked. I felt Nathaniel's arm tense beneath my fingers, but when I glanced at him, there was something like pride in his expression. "Alice is correct," he said. "She will be addressed directly, with the respect due to a potential Luna." "Potential being the operative word," said a striking woman with close-cropped dark hair and eyes like chips of ice. "What proof do we have beyond your instinctive reaction? Powerful as your senses are, Your Majesty, even you are susceptible to error." "I am not," Nathaniel said flatly. "But if additional proof is required, Elder Thorn may perform the traditional assessment." All eyes turned to a figure I hadn't noticed before, a small, ancient woman seated slightly apart from the others, her white hair falling in a long braid over one shoulder, her dark eyes sharp and penetrating despite her apparent age. "Step forward, child," she commanded, her voice surprisingly strong. Nathaniel released my arm with visible reluctance, and I approached the elder, conscious of every eye in the room following my movement. "Your hand," Elder Thorn instructed, extending her own weathered palm. When I placed my hand in hers, her fingers closed around mine with surprising strength. Her eyes locked with mine, and I felt a strange pressure in my mind, as though someone were gently but insistently pushing against a door I hadn't known existed. "Interesting," she murmured. "You carry old magic, girl, older even than our own." Her gaze dropped to the compass at my throat. "That artifact, it is bound to you in ways you do not understand." "It was my father's," I said. "Robert Bennet. I believe he came to these woods 10 years ago and never returned." "Did your people encounter him?" Another murmur, louder this time, swept through the council. Elderthorn's eyes widened fractionally, and she released my hand as though it had suddenly burned her. "You are his daughter," she said. Not a question, but a statement. The Pathfinder's child. The what?" I asked, but she had already turned to Nathaniel. "She must be told, Your Majesty, all of it. The truth of her father, of the compass, of her own nature, before the awakening ritual can even be considered." "Ritual?" I repeated, alarm rising. "What ritual?" Nathaniel was beside me again in an instant, his hand at the small of my back, supportive, not restraining, but the gesture clearly claiming me before his council. "Nothing will happen without your consent, Alice. I give you my word as Alpha and King." "The girl needs time," Elderthorn announced to the room at large, "and information. I move that the formal recognition be delayed until the next full moon, giving her opportunity to learn our ways and make an informed choice." "The next full moon is 3 weeks away," objected the silver-haired man. "If she truly carries Luna essence, leaving it dormant for so long could be dangerous, for her and for all of us. Already our borders weaken with her untrained energy disrupting the ancient protections." "Nevertheless," said Elderthorn firmly, "forcing an awakening on an unwilling Luna has never ended well in our history. 3 weeks is not so long, even with the equinox approaching." Her dark eyes found mine again, unless, of course, the young woman wishes to proceed immediately. All eyes returned to me, expectant, judgmental, curious. The weight of their combined attention was suffocating. Through it all, I felt Nathaniel's silent presence beside me, offering support without pressure. "I need to know about my father first," I said, finding strength in the familiar quest that had driven me for a decade. "If you have information about him, about what happened to him, I want to hear it before I make any decisions about rituals or awakenings or whatever else you're talking about." Elderthorn nodded, seeming pleased by my response. "Wise. The Pathfinder's daughter indeed." She looked to Nathaniel. "I will tell her what I know, with your Majesty's permission. You have it," he said, then addressed the council at large. "We will reconvene at the next full moon. Until then, Alice Bennet will be treated as an honored guest, with all the protection and respect such status confers." His tone made it clear that this was not a suggestion, but a royal decree. As the council members filed out, many casting curious glances my way, I felt the first stirrings of something beyond fear and confusion, a tentative hope that here, finally, I might find answers about my father's disappearance. And perhaps, though I was barely ready to acknowledge it even to myself, answers about the emptiness that had followed me throughout my life, the sense that I was always searching for something just beyond my reach. Nathaniel's hand remained at the small of my back, warm and steady, as Elderthorn approached us. "Come, child," she said. "It is time you learned the truth of the compass you wear, and the man who gave it to you. Time you learned about the Pathfinders, and why your father walked a road from which there is no return." Elderthorn led us from the council chamber through a series of wooden corridors that seemed to burrow deeper into the heart of what I was beginning to realize was an extensive compound hidden within the forest. Nathaniel walked beside me, his presence both reassuring and unsettling, a contradiction that seemed to define everything about him and the effect he had on me. We emerged into a small, circular room, lined with bookshelves containing ancient-looking volumes bound in leather, and what appeared to be parchment scrolls carefully arranged in wooden slots. A fire burned in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls, and the air smelled of herbs and old paper. "Sit," Elderthorn instructed, gesturing to cushioned seats arranged near the fire. As I settled into one, she moved to a shelf and selected a worn leather tome with careful hands. "Your father's compass," she said, returning to sit across from me. "May I see it?" Reluctantly, I removed the silver chain from around my neck and placed the compass in her outstretched palm. It had never left my person since the day my father had fastened it around my neck, and I felt strangely vulnerable without its familiar weight. Elderthorn examined it with reverent fingers, turning it over to reveal engravings on the back that I had never noticed before. Symbols that resembled neither letters nor numbers, but something more primal, like the marks ancient cultures might have carved into stone. "This is one of the 7, she said finally, her voice hushed with respect. "The compasses of the Pathfinders, created in the earliest days when the boundaries between worlds were still being established. Worlds? I echoed, glancing at Nathaniel, who watched the exchange with intense focus. You mean like other planets? A smile briefly touched Elder Thorn's weathered face. No, child. I mean realms. Layers of existence that occupy the same space, but vibrate at different frequencies. The human world you know is but one of several that exist alongside each other, separated by veils of energy and perception. I fought the urge to laugh hysterically. Werewolves were one thing, but parallel dimensions. It was too much. And my father was a pathfinder, she confirmed. One of the rare humans born with the ability to sense these boundaries and with the proper tools to cross them. The compasses were created to guide such individuals, to help them navigate between worlds without becoming lost in the spaces between. My skepticism must have shown on my face, because Nathaniel leaned forward, his golden eyes intent. You have seen us shift from wolf to human and back again, he said. Is it so difficult to accept that other transformations, other realities might exist beyond your experience? Put that way, it was harder to dismiss outright. I had already witnessed the impossible. Perhaps my definition of reality needed expanding. So if my father was this pathfinder, where did he go? Why didn't he come back? Elder Thorn exchanged a glance with Nathaniel before answering. The pathfinders serve a sacred purpose. They maintain the boundaries between realms, ensuring that dangerous energies do not leak through, and that creatures that belong in one world do not inadvertently enter another. It is lonely work, and dangerous. She placed the compass gently on a small table between us. 10 years ago, a disturbance occurred at the eastern boundary of our territory, a thinning of the veil between our world and what we call the Shadow Realm, a place of dark energies and malevolent entities. Your father was called to repair this breach. Called by whom? I asked. By the compass, she replied simply. The 7 respond to imbalances in the boundaries. They heat up. Their needles point toward the disturbance, and they compel their bearers to investigate. I remembered how my father had become increasingly distracted in the weeks before his disappearance, how he would stare at the compass for long periods, how he had taken to hiking in the woods with increasing frequency. At the time, I had attributed it to the growing discord between him and my mother, the sense that our family was slowly fracturing under the weight of unspoken tensions. He went into these woods to fix some kind of interdimensional tear. The words sounded ridiculous even as I said them. Yet a part of me, the part that had always known there was something more to my father's disappearance than a simple hiking accident, responded to the explanation with growing certainty. Yes, Elder Thorn confirmed. Our scouts reported his presence near the boundary, but by our ancient treaties with the Pathfinders, we were forbidden to interfere with his work. When he did not emerge after several days, a small group went to investigate. They found signs of a great struggle, but no trace of your father himself. Her dark eyes held genuine regret. We believed he had either been lost to the Shadow Realm, or had succeeded in repairing the breach, but had been forced to cross over himself to complete the seal. So he's dead? The word caught in my throat, a possibility I had both feared and rejected for a decade. Not necessarily, Nathaniel said, speaking for the first time since we had entered the room. The Shadow Realm doesn't operate by the same rules as our world or the human one. Time moves differently there. If he crossed over, he might still be alive, though, changed by his experiences. Hope and dread warred within me. And the compass? If it called to him, why did he leave it with me? Elder Thorn's expression grew solemn. Because, child, you are not merely the daughter of a pathfinder. You are a pathfinder yourself, or would have been had your father been able to complete your training. The revelation struck me like a physical blow. That's not possible. The compass has never worked for me. The needle just spins randomly. Because you were not ready, she explained. The compasses respond only to those who have undergone the awakening ritual, which typically happens when a pathfinder reaches maturity. Your father likely planned to perform this ritual when you turned 18, but he vanished before that time came. I stared at the compass, seeing it with new eyes, not just a memento of my missing father, but a powerful artifact tied to abilities I had never known I possessed. And this connects to the Luna thing. How? That said Elder Thorn, is the extraordinary part. In all our recorded history, there has never been a Luna who was also a potential pathfinder. The two bloodlines have remained separate, serving different but complementary purposes in maintaining the balance between worlds. She looked to Nathaniel, whose expression had grown increasingly intense as the conversation progressed. It explains the unusual strength of the bond you sensed, Your Majesty. She carries dual energies, Luna and Pathfinder both. Nathaniel's eyes never left my face. It explains many things, he agreed softly. The disturbances at our boundaries that have grown stronger in recent years. The way the pack felt her presence long before she physically entered our territory. The intensity of the connection. The last word seemed inadequate for whatever he was experiencing, judging by the barely restrained emotion in his voice. I don't understand what any of this means for me, I said, feeling overwhelmed by revelations that were reshaping my entire understanding of myself and my past. What exactly is a Luna, beyond being some kind of werewolf queen? The Luna is the spiritual counterpart to the Alpha King, Elder Thorn explained. While the Alpha draws strength from dominance and protection, the Luna channels energy from intuition and harmony. Together, they create a balanced power that sustains the pack and maintains our connection to the natural world. A pack without an Alpha grows weak and dissolves. A pack without a Luna may remain strong, but grows increasingly harsh, unbalanced. I looked at Nathaniel, seeing him in a new light, 5 centuries without his counterpart, ruling through strength alone, without the tempering influence this Luna was supposed to provide. No wonder he seemed so intense, so driven. He had been incomplete for longer than I could imagine. And if I refuse this role? I asked, needing to understand my options. If I walk away? Elder Thorn's expression grew grave. You may try, but the dual nature of your heritage, Pathfinder and Luna both, means you are bound to forces beyond your control. The compass will continue to call to you, as will the bond with your Alpha. You might resist for a time, but eventually these energies would either draw you back or, she hesitated. Or what? I prompted. Or destroy you, she finished quietly. Unchecked, unawakened power of this magnitude would eventually overwhelm your human form. It would manifest as illness first, strange symptoms that human doctors could not diagnose or treat, then emotional instability, hallucinations, and finally, a complete breakdown of your physical body. That's convenient, I said bitterly. Accept this impossible role or die. Not much of a choice. It is not about convenience, Nathaniel said, his voice gentle despite the intensity of his gaze. It is about nature, your nature. You cannot deny what you are any more than a bird can decide to stop flying, or a fish can choose to live on land. He moved from his chair to kneel before me, bringing our eyes level. I understand your fear, your resistance. Everything you believed about yourself, about the world, has been challenged in the space of a day. But consider that perhaps what you are being offered is not a prison, but a key to understanding the emptiness you have carried, to discovering your true potential, to finding answers about your father's fate. His words resonated with an uncomfortable truth. All my life, I had felt like a puzzle with missing pieces, never quite fitting in, never finding true purpose or belonging. What if these fantastical revelations were not a disruption of my reality, but an explanation for why reality had never quite made sense? The full moon is 3 weeks away, Nathaniel continued. Stay with us until then. Learn about our ways, about the heritage of both Luna and Pathfinder. If, at the end of that time, you still wish to return to your human life, I will personally escort you to the boundary and ensure your safe passage. His eyes betrayed how difficult this offer was for him. I will not force you to accept a bond that you reject, even if doing so condemns me to continue alone. The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep within me. Whatever else Nathaniel might be, Alpha, King, Werewolf, in this moment, he was simply a man who had spent centuries waiting for something he believed I could provide. The weight of that expectation was terrifying, but also, strangely, affirming. 3 weeks. I agreed cautiously. But I make no promises about what happens after that. Relief flickered across his features, quickly masked by his usual regal composure as he rose to his feet. Agreed. Starting tomorrow, you will begin training in both Luna traditions and Pathfinder knowledge, to the extent that we can provide the latter. He looked to Elder Thorn. The Council will need to be informed of her dual heritage. It complicates matters. Indeed it does, she agreed, studying me with renewed interest. But it also presents opportunities. If she can be properly trained in both lineages, she might be able to help us locate the breach that claimed her father, and perhaps even determine if he can be recovered. My heart leapt at the possibility. You think he might still be alive, that I could find him? It is a hope, not a certainty, Elder Thorn cautioned. But yes, with the proper training and the compass to guide you, you might succeed where our own attempts have failed. She gathered the ancient tome she had consulted earlier and returned it carefully to its shelf. For now, you should rest. The revelations of today are much to process, and tomorrow your real work begins. Nathaniel escorted me back through the compound, past curious eyes that quickly averted when he glanced their way. The afternoon sun filtered through cleverly designed skylights in the wooden ceilings, revealing a community far more extensive than I had initially realized. We passed what looked like training grounds, where werewolves in human form practiced fighting techniques, gardens where others tended plants I didn't recognize, and communal areas where pack members gathered in small groups, their conversations falling silent as we walked by. How many of you are there? I asked, genuinely curious about the society that had remained hidden from human awareness. In this pack? About 300, Nathaniel answered. We are the largest of the 7 major packs in North America, and the only royal bloodline on this continent. Pride colored his tone. Our territory encompasses nearly 1,000 square miles of forest and mountain. And humans never notice, in the age of satellite imaging and drones? A smile touched his lips. We have our methods of diverting attention and technology. Some of it is magic, the natural energy that flows through pack bonds and is amplified by the Alpha-Luna connection. Some is more mundane. We own logging companies and mining operations that give us legitimate reasons to control access to large tracts of land, and we have pack members in strategic positions within government agencies that might otherwise take too much interest in our territory. It was both impressive and slightly disturbing to realize how thoroughly they had managed to hide in plain sight. And the shifting itself, the whole wolf transformation thing, is both our greatest gift and our heaviest burden, he said. The ability to shift between forms connects us to primal energies most humans never experience. It gives us strength, enhanced senses, accelerated healing, and extended lifespans. But it also binds us to the moon's cycles and subjects us to instincts that must be carefully controlled. We had reached my quarters, a different room from where I had spent the previous night, larger and more elaborately furnished, with a sitting area, a sleeping chamber, and what appeared to be a private bathing space. These will be your rooms during your stay, Nathaniel said, pausing at the threshold. They adjoin my own chambers, though there is a door between them that can be locked from your side. He seemed eager for me to understand that he was not presuming anything about our relationship. Elise will attend you if you need anything. Clothing, food, books. If you wish to explore the compound, please do so, but take either Elise or Mira with you. Not everyone in the pack is comfortable with your presence yet. The reminder that I was essentially in the heart of a werewolf society, where I might not be universally welcome, was sobering. Are they afraid of me, or do they resent me? Neither, precisely, he said after a moment's consideration. They are uncertain. Your arrival represents change, and change is difficult for a society as traditional as ours. Some are excited by the possibility that their king has finally found his Luna. Others fear what your human background and Pathfinder heritage might mean for our future. His golden eyes held mine. Prove yourself to them, as I know you can, and they will accept you. Many will come to love you, in time. The casual way he spoke of love, as though it were an inevitable development rather than a precious rarity, reminded me of how different his world was from mine. In his centuries-long existence, he had developed certainties that my 25 years of life hadn't prepared me to share. I'll try to be respectful of your customs, I offered, not knowing what else to say. even if I'm still not convinced I belong here." His expression softened, and he reached out slowly, telegraphing his intent before his fingers made contact with my cheek in the lightest of touches. "You belong exactly where you are, Alice Bennett. Perhaps for the first time in your life." His hand dropped away, but the warmth of that brief contact lingered. "Rest now. Tomorrow, your education begins in earnest." After he left, I explored my new accommodations, finding the wardrobe already stocked with clothing in my size, simple tunics and pants similar to what I had seen others wearing, but also more formal attire, including several dresses that rivaled the one I still wore. In the bathing chamber, I discovered a sunken tub filled with steaming water scented with herbs, and realized with relief that someone, Elise probably, had anticipated my need to wash away the physical and emotional residue of the past day's events. As I soaked in the fragrant water, I found myself examining the compass that I had placed carefully at the edge of the tub, unwilling to be separated from it even temporarily. Had it really called to my father? Had he known what awaited him in these woods? Had he suspected what I supposedly was? More importantly, if Elder Thorne was right, could I possibly find him after all this time? The hope that had ignited at her words refused to be extinguished, despite my attempts at caution. For 10 years, I had lived with the gnawing uncertainty of my father's fate. If there was even the slightest chance of discovering what had happened to him, of possibly bringing him home, how could I walk away? That night, I dreamed of running through the forest on 4 legs, the sense of the wilderness sharp and intoxicating in my heightened awareness. Beside me ran a massive black wolf, our paces perfectly synchronized, our breaths creating twin clouds in the cold night air. Ahead of us, a shimmer appeared in the darkness, a distortion in the fabric of reality, through which glimpses of another landscape flickered, a twisted version of the same forest, where shadows moved with purpose and malevolence. Standing before this rift was a figure I recognized despite the decade that had passed. My father, his back to us, the compass in his hand glowing with an inner light as he worked to mend the tear between worlds. He turned at our approach, his face older but his eyes the same, and spoke a single word that I couldn't hear but somehow understood. Finally. I woke with tears on my face and the compass clutched in my hand, its needle pointing steadily toward the eastern wall of my room. The direction, I realized with a shiver, of the rising sun and the boundary where my father had vanished from this world. The next week passed in a blur of new experiences and information. Each morning, Elder Thorne would summon me to her library for lessons on Pathfinder history and techniques, what little she knew from the ancient texts preserved by the Pack. I learned that Pathfinders had once been more common, serving as ambassadors and guardians between the various realms, but their numbers had dwindled over centuries as humans became increasingly disconnected from the natural energies that flowed through the world. "The compass responds to your intent," she explained one morning, watching as I turned the artifact over in my hands. "But intent requires knowledge and focus. You must learn to listen to it, to feel the subtle vibrations that indicate proximity to a boundary." I closed my eyes, concentrating on the cool metal against my palm. For a moment, nothing happened, and then, a faint warmth, a subtle pulse, like a distant heartbeat. My eyes flew open. I felt something. Elder Thorne nodded, satisfaction evident in her weathered face. "Good. The connection grows stronger. With practice, you will learn to interpret these signals, to distinguish between different types of boundaries and disturbances." Afternoons were devoted to Luna training with Mira, whose initial coolness had gradually given way to a grudging respect as she observed my determination to understand the role I might be expected to play. She taught me about pack dynamics, about the complex social hierarchies that governed werewolf society, and about the unique abilities a Luna possessed. "The Luna's power is complementary to the Alpha's," she explained as we walked through the forest surrounding the compound. "Where his strength comes from dominance and protection, yours comes from harmony and intuition. You can sense the emotional state of pack members, soothe aggression, and strengthen the bonds between them." "Like some kind of werewolf therapist?" I asked, only half joking. Mira's lips twitched in what might have been a suppressed smile. "In a sense. But it's more instinctive than that. The Luna doesn't just talk through problems. She can actually influence the energetic connections that bind pack members together. That sounds invasive, I said, uncomfortable with the idea of manipulating others' emotions. It would be in human terms, she conceded. But werewolves aren't fully human. The pack bond is a tangible thing for us, a connection we consciously choose and maintain. The Luna doesn't create feelings that aren't there. She merely helps us recognize and strengthen the connections we've already formed. Evenings belonged to Nathaniel. Despite his duties as king, he made time each night to dine with me, either privately in my quarters or, increasingly, in the communal dining hall where other pack members could observe our interactions. These public appearances were political, I understood, a way of acclimating the pack to my presence and reinforcing Nathaniel's claim that I was, indeed, his Luna. During these shared meals, Nathaniel told me stories of his long life, of the centuries he had spent building and protecting his pack, of the changes he had witnessed in both werewolf and human societies. He spoke of battles with rival packs, of treaties negotiated with other supernatural entities, of the constant vigilance required to keep their existence hidden from the increasingly invasive technology of the modern world. The more humans advance, the more difficult it becomes to maintain our separation, he admitted one evening as we sat before the fire in my chambers. Satellite imaging, environmental monitoring, social media, all of these make it harder to move undetected or explain away unusual occurrences. Maybe separation isn't sustainable, I suggested, the thought occurring to me even as I spoke it. Maybe eventually, humans will have to know about werewolves, about other realms, about all of it. His golden eyes reflected the dancing flames. Perhaps. But history has taught us caution. Humans fear what they don't understand, and fear leads to violence. We have survived this long by remaining in shadow. Not all humans would react with fear, I argued. Some would be fascinated, accepting. Like you, he asked, his gaze shifting from the fire to my face with an intensity that still made my heart race. You, who ran from us initially? Who fainted at the first sight of transformation? I flushed, unable to deny the accusation. That was shock, not fear. Well, not only fear. And I'm still here, aren't I? You are, he agreed, a smile softening his features. Against considerable odds and your own initial resistance. You have surprised me, Alice Bennett. Few humans would adapt so quickly to having their understanding of reality so thoroughly disrupted. I'm not entirely human, apparently, I reminded him, the words coming more easily than they would have just days before. Part potential werewolf queen, part interdimensional traveler, if your experts are to be believed. He laughed, the sound rich and warm in the quiet room. When you put it that way, it sounds rather fantastical. Doesn't it? I smiled back, struck by how comfortable this exchange felt, how natural it had become to sit with him and discuss extraordinary things as though they were commonplace. Somewhere in the past week, fear had given way to curiosity and resistance to cautious exploration. Nathaniel seemed to sense the shift in my thoughts, his expression growing more serious. You're beginning to accept it, aren't you? Not just intellectually, but in your heart. I considered his question carefully. I'm beginning to accept that there's more to the world than I knew, and more to myself as well. Whether that means I'm meant to be this Luna person, or use this compass to find my father, or both, that's still something I'm figuring out. He nodded, respecting my honesty. Fair enough. But you no longer plan to run at the first opportunity? No, I admitted. I don't think I do. Something like relief crossed his face, there and gone in an instant before his usual composed expression returned. I'm glad. You belong here, Alice, with us, with me. The simple certainty in his voice both comforted and unnerved me. How could he be so sure of something I was still struggling to comprehend? And yet, each day that passed made his conviction seem less presumptuous and more like a truth I was slowly catching up to. On the 8th day of my stay, Elise burst into my morning lesson with Elder Thorne, her usually cheerful face tight with concern. Scouts have reported unusual activity at the eastern boundary, she announced without preamble. The king requests your presence in the council chamber immediately, both of you. Elder Thorn rose with surprising agility for her age. What kind of activity? Fluctuations in the energy barrier, Elise replied as we hurried through the corridors. And tracks that don't belong to any creatures from our side. My pulse quickened. The eastern boundary, where my father had disappeared. Something came through, or tried to. Elise said grimly. The scouts couldn't be certain. The council chamber was already filled with tense voices when we arrived. Nathaniel stood at the head of the table, his powerful frame rigid with controlled energy, as he listened to reports from what appeared to be the pack's warriors, men and women with the hard-eyed look of those accustomed to confronting danger. He looked up as we entered, his gaze finding mine immediately, a complex emotion flickering across his features before he returned his attention to the scout who was speaking. Like nothing we've seen before, the young man was saying, his hands gesturing emphatically. The boundary itself seemed to ripple, and there was a scent. Not animal, not human, but something wrong. Show me, Nathaniel commanded, unrolling a large map across the table's surface. The scout pointed to a location that sent a chill through me, even before Elder Thorn whispered, "The same place, after all these years." "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. "The breach your father was called to repair," she explained, her dark eyes troubled. "It appears to be active once more." Nathaniel looked up sharply, having caught our exchange despite the distance. "You recognize the location?" Elder Thorn nodded gravely. "It is where Robert Bennett disappeared a decade ago. The coincidence cannot be ignored, especially with his daughter now among us." All eyes turned to me, speculation and wariness in equal measure. The compass at my throat suddenly felt warm against my skin, and when I glanced down, I saw that its needle was pointing steadily eastward, directly toward the location marked on the map. "The compass responds," Nathaniel observed, his voice cutting through the murmurs that had broken out around the table. "Alice, do you feel anything else? Any pull or intuition?" I hesitated, aware of the weight of expectation in the room. "It's warm," I said finally. "And there's a sort of humming sensation, like it's trying to tell me something, but I don't know how to listen properly." "The awakening ritual would strengthen her connection to both her Luna and Pathfinder heritage," Mira said, addressing Nathaniel directly. "If this disturbance is related to her father, she might be able to sense more after the ritual is complete." "The full moon is still nearly 2 weeks away," Elder Thorn objected. "To accelerate the awakening without proper preparation could be dangerous." "More dangerous than whatever may be attempting to breach the boundary between realms," countered the silver-haired counselor I had met during my first formal audience. "If entities from the Shadow Realm are testing our defenses, we need every advantage, including a fully awakened Luna." "I won't be rushed into anything," I said firmly, finding my voice despite the tension in the room. "Not until I understand exactly what this awakening entails, and what it would mean for me." Nathaniel raised a hand, silencing the debate that threatened to erupt. "Alice is right. The choice must be hers, and it must be informed." He looked to Elder Thorn. "Explain the ritual to her, fully and honestly. In the meantime, I will double the patrols at the eastern boundary and prepare our warriors for potential incursion." As the council broke into smaller groups to discuss strategy, Nathaniel approached us, his focus entirely on me despite the crisis unfolding. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. "I'm fine," I assured him, touched by his concern, even as I struggled to process the implications of what we had just learned. Just processing. "If this is connected to my father, then perhaps it is not coincidence that you found your way to us now," he completed the thought. "The compass may have been guiding you all along, preparing for this moment." The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. Had my entire life been building toward this confluence of events? Had my father somehow known or arranged for me to find Nathaniel's pack when the breach reopened? "I need to see it," I said suddenly, the certainty coming from somewhere deep inside. "The boundary, where my father disappeared. I need to be there." Nathaniel's expression grew troubled. "It's too dangerous. If something is indeed attempting to cross over, then I might be the only one who can sense what it is," I interrupted. "Elder Thorn said it herself. I have dual heritage, both Luna and Pathfinder. If anyone can figure out what's happening at that boundary, it's me." "She is not wrong, Your Majesty," Elder Thorne said quietly. The compass responds to her, even untrained as she is. At the site itself, her connection may be strong enough to provide insights our scouts cannot. Nathaniel's jaw tightened, conflict evident in his golden eyes. I cannot risk you, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Not when I've only just found you. Something warm unfurled in my chest at his words, at the raw concern beneath his regal exterior. Over the past week, I had come to see beyond the imposing Alpha King to the man beneath, a man who had carried the weight of leadership and loneliness for centuries, who protected his people with unwavering dedication, who looked at me as though I were something precious he had almost given up hope of finding. You won't lose me, I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. But I need to do this, for my father, and for myself. I've spent 10 years wondering what happened to him. I can't turn away from the possibility of answers, not when they're so close. He studied me for a long moment, conflict giving way to grudging respect. Very well. But I will accompany you personally, along with my strongest warriors, and at the first sign of danger, you will retreat to safety. These are my conditions, non-negotiable. I nodded, recognizing the compromise for what it was. Agreed. Then we leave at dawn, he declared, turning to issue orders to the waiting pack members. Make whatever preparations you need today. Elder Thorne, continue her instruction. Anything that might help her recognize or interpret what we may find at the boundary. As the council chamber emptied, I felt a curious mixture of anticipation and dread. Tomorrow, I would visit the place where my father had vanished, possibly the same place he had been trying to reach when he gave me the compass and told me it would always point to where I belonged. What aren't you telling me about the awakening ritual? I asked Elder Thorne as we returned to her library. Everyone seems to have strong opinions about it, but no one's actually explained what it involves. The elder sighed, settling into her chair with the weight of her years suddenly visible. The ritual has 2 parts, one for your Luna nature, one for your Pathfinder heritage. Both involve transformation, but of different kinds. Transformation? You mean I would become a werewolf? She nodded. The Luna awakening would activate the dormant shifter genes you carry, allowing you to take wolf form. It is typically triggered by the bite of your alpha mate during the full moon, when his power is at its peak, and can catalyze the change in you. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. Nathaniel would bite me? Yes. The exchange of blood creates a permanent bond between Alpha and Luna, linking your energies and completing the circuit of power that flows between you. She must have seen the alarm in my face because she added, It is not done violently, child. It is a sacred act, performed with consent and preparation. Many Lunas describe it as transcendent, the moment when they finally feel complete. And the Pathfinder part? I asked, trying to imagine allowing Nathaniel, or anyone, to bite me hard enough to draw blood, no matter how sacred the context. That is more complex, and my knowledge is limited, Elder Thorne admitted. The texts speak of a ritual in which the compass is activated by the Pathfinder's will and blood, creating a connection that allows them to perceive and traverse the boundaries between realms. This, too, involves transformation, though not of physical form. Rather, it is a shift in perception and consciousness. My blood again, I noted, unable to keep the wariness from my voice. These rituals seem to involve a lot of bleeding. A smile touched her lips. Blood is life, child. It carries our essence, our power. Most significant magic requires it as catalyst or component. She reached for an ancient text bound in faded leather. Here. This might help you understand what you would experience during the Pathfinder awakening. The book contained drawings of what appeared to be doorways or arches formed of light, alongside dense text in a language I couldn't read. Elder Thorne translated, her finger tracing the strange symbols. The awakened Pathfinder stands between worlds, 1 foot in each, belonging fully to neither. They see what others cannot, the thinning places, the tears, the bridges. Their blood, freely given to the compass, opens the eyes of spirit while the eyes of flesh remain open, creating double vision that encompasses all realms simultaneously. That sounds Disorienting, I said, trying to imagine perceiving multiple dimensions at once. I imagine it is, initially, she agreed. But the text suggests that with practice, a pathfinder learns to control this perception, to focus on one realm or another as needed, rather than being overwhelmed by all simultaneously. I thought of my father, who had sometimes seemed to be looking at things no one else could see, who would occasionally stop mid-conversation and turn his head as though hearing distant music. Had he been perceiving these other realms even in the midst of our ordinary life? If I undergo these rituals, I said slowly, I wouldn't be human anymore, not really. You have never been entirely human, child, Elder Thorn reminded me gently. These rituals would simply awaken what already lies dormant within you. But I would be changed. Permanently. Yes. There is no returning to ignorance once knowledge has been embraced. No returning to singularity once duality has been experienced. Her ancient eyes held mine. But consider this. Perhaps the emptiness you have felt throughout your life is precisely because these parts of yourself remain dormant, unexpressed. Perhaps what you fear as loss is actually completion. Her words resonated uncomfortably with thoughts I had been avoiding, that the sense of something missing, of never quite belonging, might be explained by exactly what Nathaniel and his people were offering. What if they were right? What if I was meant to be both Luna and Pathfinder, and the ache of incompleteness I had carried for as long as I could remember was the result of these dormant aspects of myself? Before I could pursue this troubling line of thought, a knock at the door announced Elise, come to help me prepare for the journey to the boundary. As I followed her back to my chambers, my mind whirled with everything I had learned about the rituals that might await me, about the breach that might have claimed my father, about the connection between these events and my unexpected arrival in Nathaniel's territory. You're very quiet, Elise observed, as she laid out practical clothing for the next day's expedition. Are you afraid of what you might find tomorrow? Yes, I admitted, but also hopeful, in a way I haven't let myself be for years. If there's even a chance my father is alive, that I might find him, or at least learn what happened to him. I understand, she said softly, pausing in her preparations. My own father was lost in a territory dispute with a rival pack when I was young. Not knowing whether he was dead or captive or simply choosing to stay away was its own kind of torture. I looked at her with new appreciation, recognizing a kindred spirit in loss. What happened? Did you ever find out? Sadness flickered across her expressive face. Eventually. He had been killed, defending our borders. Knowing was painful, but it was also a relief, to understand at last, to be able to mourn properly. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. She shrugged, the gesture at odds with the lingering sorrow in her eyes. It was long ago, and his sacrifice protected others, including me. There is honor in that. She returned to sorting through clothing with brisk efficiency. Whatever you discover tomorrow, Alice, know that the pack will support you. We protect our own. But I'm not really one of you, I pointed out. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Elise looked up, surprise evident in her shifting gray-green eyes. Of course you are. From the moment the king recognized you as his Luna, you became pack. Whether or not you eventually accept the bond formally, that recognition cannot be undone. Her certainty was both touching and unsettling. These people, these werewolves, had accepted me into their society, based solely on Nathaniel's claim that I was his destined mate. They had shared their secrets, their history, their knowledge, all on the strength of that conviction. The responsibility of such acceptance weighed heavily, especially as I remained uncertain about my place among them. That night, sleep eluded me. I stood at the window of my chamber, gazing out at the moonlit forest that stretched toward the east, toward the boundary where my father had vanished, where something now stirred after a decade of silence. The compass hung warm against my skin, its needle pointing steadily in that direction, as though eager to reunite with whatever lay beyond the veil between worlds. A soft knock at the door connecting my chambers to Nathaniel's startled me from my reverie. When I opened it, he stood there in simple clothing, his usual regal bearing softened by what appeared to be his own sleeplessness. I felt your restlessness, he said by way of explanation. The bond between us grows stronger, even without the ritual. You can feel what I'm feeling? I asked, unsettled by the implications. Not specifically, but strong emotions create ripples that I can sense, especially when you're troubled. He hesitated, unusually uncertain. May I come in? Or would you prefer solitude? After a moment's consideration, I stepped aside, allowing him to enter. I don't think solitude is helping anyway. My mind won't quiet. He moved to stand beside me at the window, his gaze following mine toward the eastern forest. You're thinking about tomorrow, about what we might find, about my father, I confirmed. And about everything else, the rituals, the awakening, what it would mean to accept the roles you all believe I'm destined for. I glanced up at him, at the strong profile outlined in moonlight. How can you be so certain about all of this? About me? He was silent for a long moment before answering. Do you know what it is to search for something for centuries? To know it exists? To feel its absence like a physical wound? But to be unable to find it no matter how far you travel, or how diligently you seek? The quiet intensity in his voice held me motionless. 500 years, Alice. 500 years of ruling alone, of making decisions that affected hundreds of lives without the balance that a Luna provides. Of feeling the pack's energy grow harsher, more volatile, without that stabilizing influence. His golden eyes, luminous in the darkness, found mine. When you entered our territory, it was like a key turning in a lock that had been jammed for half a millennium. Every instinct, every sense, every fiber of my being recognized you, not just as a potential mate, but as the specific soul that complements my own. His words sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the raw honesty in his voice. That's a lot to live up to, I said finally. A smile touched his lips. It isn't about living up to anything. It's about being who you already are. He reached out slowly, giving me time to withdraw if I wished. And when I didn't, he tucked a strand of blonde hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek. Whatever you decide after the full moon, know that finding you has already changed me, has already brought something to this pack that was missing. The warmth of his touch, the sincerity in his golden eyes, the quiet strength that emanated from him without effort, all of it combined to create a pull I was finding increasingly difficult to resist. In the short time I had known him, Nathaniel had shown himself to be not just powerful but thoughtful, not just commanding but considerate, not just a king, but a man capable of vulnerability and growth. I'm scared, I admitted, the words barely a whisper, of changing, of losing who I've been, of failing to be what everyone expects. Fear is natural, he said gently, but change is inevitable, whether you embrace these aspects of yourself or not. The question is whether you will change in alignment with your true nature, or continue fighting against it. Before I could respond, he stepped back, breaking the intimate moment with visible reluctance. Rest if you can. Dawn comes early, and the journey to the boundary is not an easy one. As he turned to leave, I caught his hand impulsively. Stay, I said, surprising myself with the request. Just sit with me for a while. I don't want to be alone with my thoughts tonight. The flash of joy that crossed his features was quickly tempered with respect for the limited nature of my invitation. Of course, he said simply. We sat together before the dying fire, not speaking much, but drawing comfort from each other's presence. At some point, my exhaustion overcame my anxiety, and I drifted into sleep with my head against his shoulder, his steady heartbeat a reassuring rhythm against my ear. My last conscious thought before dreams claimed me was that perhaps belonging didn't have to mean surrendering who I was. Perhaps it could mean becoming more fully myself than I had ever been allowed to be before. Dawn broke with a somber crimson glow that painted the forest in shades of rust and gold. I stood in the compound's central courtyard, surrounded by Nathaniel's chosen warriors, 10 of his strongest fighters, including Mira, whose combat skills were apparently as formidable as her administrative abilities. They were all in human form, dressed in practical clothing that would allow for quick shifting if necessary, weapons strapped to their bodies despite their natural defenses. Nathaniel himself appeared last, his powerful presence immediately drawing all eyes. He had foregone his usual regal attire for something more suited to forest travel, but nothing could diminish the authority that emanated from him. His golden eyes found mine immediately, a silent question in their depths. I nodded slightly, answering his unspoken concern. I was as ready as I could be for whatever awaited us at the boundary. We moved swiftly and silently, he addressed the gathered warriors. Our priority is assessment, not engagement. If hostile entities have crossed from the Shadow Realm, we observe and report back. Combat is authorized only in defense of our Luna, or if retreat is impossible. The formal designation, our Luna, sent a shiver through me that I couldn't entirely classify as discomfort. Over the past days, I had grown accustomed to hearing myself referred to this way, had even begun to consider the possibility that they might be right about my nature and destiny. The journey through the forest took the better part of the morning. Where human hikers might have struggled with the rough terrain, Nathaniel's people moved with fluid grace, their enhanced strength and agility, allowing them to navigate fallen trees and steep inclines with minimal effort. I did my best to keep pace, grateful when Elise occasionally dropped back to offer a steadying hand or point out easier paths. As we traveled eastward, I became increasingly aware of the compass around my neck. The gentle warmth I had felt the previous day intensified, and the humming sensation grew more pronounced. Less like background noise, and more like words just below the threshold of comprehension. I found myself touching it frequently, as though physical contact might help me decipher its message. Nathaniel noticed, falling into step beside me during a relatively level stretch of the journey. "What do you feel?" he asked quietly, keeping our conversation private from the others. "It's getting stronger," I replied, fingers curled around the silver disc, the warmth, the vibration. And there's something else, like pressure behind my eyes, or a sound just out of hearing range. It's hard to describe. He nodded thoughtfully. Your Pathfinder ability's awakening, perhaps. Even without the ritual, proximity to the boundary may be activating dormant senses. The possibility both excited and unnerved me. If simply approaching the boundary could stimulate these latent abilities, what might the full awakening ritual unleash? Around midday, the forest began to change subtly. The vibrant autumn colors I had admired during my initial hike faded, replaced by muted tones and grayish undergrowth. The air grew colder, carrying a metallic tang that reminded me of approaching thunderstorms. Birds and insects fell silent, creating an unnatural stillness that raised the hair on my arms. "We're getting close," Mira murmured, coming to walk on my other side. Her hand rested on the hilt of a long knife at her hip, her posture alert and wary. The boundary affects the natural world even when it's stable. When it's disturbed, the effects intensify. I nodded, understanding now why hikers generally avoided this area without consciously knowing why. There was something repellent about the atmosphere, something that triggered instinctive caution in any creature sensitive to its surroundings. Nathaniel signaled a halt at the edge of a small clearing. The trees here were twisted, their trunks bent at unnatural angles as though they had grown in a strong wind that affected no other part of the forest. At the center of the clearing stood a circle of stones, not the work of human hands, but naturally occurring rock formations that had somehow arranged themselves in a perfect circle, approximately 20 feet in diameter. "The boundary point," Nathaniel explained softly. "One of the thinnest places between our realm and the Shadow Realm. There are others scattered throughout our territory, but this one has always been the most active." I stared at the stone circle, seeing nothing outwardly supernatural or threatening. But as I focused, the compass at my throat grew hot enough to burn, and the pressure behind my eyes intensified until I had to blink rapidly to clear my vision. "Something's not right," I whispered, the certainty coming from a place beyond conscious thought. "The air, it's wrong." Nathaniel motioned for his warriors to spread out, creating a perimeter around the clearing while maintaining distance from the stone circle itself. "What do you see, Alice?" he asked, his voice steady despite the tension evident in his powerful frame. "Not see, feel." I stepped forward hesitantly, drawn by a pull I couldn't fully understand. As I approached the circle, the world around me seemed to shimmer, as though I were looking through heat waves or rippling water. The boundary is thinning, fluctuating. The compass burned against my skin, its needle spinning wildly before suddenly stopping, pointing directly at the center of the stone circle. Without conscious decision, I found myself moving forward, step by hesitant step, until I stood at the edge of the circle itself. "Alice," Nathaniel called, alarm evident in his voice. "Don't go any closer, not without preparation." I paused, his concern penetrating the strange fog that had descended over my thoughts. I need to see it properly," I said, struggling to articulate the compulsion driving me. "The compass is trying to show me something." "Then let me come with you," he insisted, moving to my side with supernatural speed. His hand found mine, warm and solid, anchoring me against the pull of whatever lay beyond the stone circle. Together, we approached the center of the circle. With each step, the shimmering in the air intensified, and the pressure in my head built until it was nearly painful. 3 steps from the very center, I gasped as the world around me suddenly split. It was as though a veil had been ripped away from my eyes. I could still see the forest, the stones, Nathaniel beside me, but superimposed over this reality was another, a twisted version of the same clearing, where the trees were blackened and malformed, where the sky glowed with an eerie purplish light, and where the air itself seemed thick with malevolent energy. "I can see it," I breathed, my grip on Nathaniel's hand tightening convulsively. The other side, the shadow realm. His golden eyes widened, focusing intently on my face rather than on the empty space I was staring into. "What do you see?" Before I could answer, movement caught my eye, a rippling distortion at the center of the overlapping realities. Something was pushing against the boundary from the other side, creating waves of energy that pulsed outward like ripples in a pond. As I watched in horrified fascination, a tear began to form, a small vertical split in the fabric of reality itself, through which glimpses of that twisted landscape flashed more clearly. "Something's coming through," I gasped, instinctively backing away and pulling Nathaniel with me. "The boundary is breaking." His warriors tensed, weapons raised, though they couldn't see what I was describing. Nathaniel's face hardened into a mask of grim determination. "How large is the breach?" "Small, but growing," I reported, watching as the tear elongated, now about a foot in length. "It's like a cut that's being slowly forced open from the other side." Elder Thorne's words from days earlier echoed in my mind. Your father was called to repair this breach. Had he seen exactly what I was seeing now? Had he somehow crossed over to seal it from the other side? As though in response to my thoughts, the compass blazed hot against my skin, the pain sharp enough to make me cry out. When I looked down, the metal was glowing with an inner light, the symbols on its back illuminated as though molten. "It knows," I whispered, a certainty beyond logic filling me. "The compass knows what needs to be done." Before Nathaniel could stop me, I pulled free of his grasp and stepped directly toward the tear in reality. The dual vision intensified until I could barely distinguish between the 2 overlapping worlds. The compass pulled against its chain, as though magnetically drawn to the breach. "Alice, no!" Nathaniel lunged after me, but it was too late. My hand, moving of its own accord, held the compass toward the tear. The moment the metal touched the distortion, a blinding flash of light erupted, accompanied by a sound like reality itself tearing. I was thrown backward by an invisible force, landing hard against Nathaniel, who had moved with preternatural speed to catch me. When my vision cleared, the tear was larger, now a vertical slit nearly 6 feet tall, glowing with pulsating energy. And through it stepped a figure I had seen only in my dreams for the past decade. My father. But not as I remembered him. The man who emerged from the tear was gaunt and weathered, his once brown hair now completely white, his clothing tattered and strange, made of materials I couldn't identify. The compass in my hand pulsed in time with one that hung around his neck, the twin artifacts recognizing each other across the decade of separation. "Alice," he said, his voice rough as though long unused. "You came. You finally came." I stared in disbelief, unable to process the reality of his presence. "Dad? How are you here?" Behind him, the tear in reality pulsed ominously, widening further. Through it, I could see dark shapes moving in that twisted landscape, pressing forward as though eager to follow my father through the opening. "No time," he said urgently, his eyes, the same blue as mine, darting nervously toward the breach. "They're coming. I've held them back for years, but my strength is failing. The seal can only be remade by blood of the same line, by you, Alice." Nathaniel moved protectively to my side, his golden eyes fixed on my father with wary assessment. "You're Robert Bennett, the Pathfinder who disappeared." My father nodded, recognition flashing in his gaunt face. "The Alpha King. She found you then. Good. She'll need your strength for what comes next." He looked back at me, urgency in every line of his body. "The compass, Alice. You must use it as I taught you." "You didn't teach me anything," I protested, confusion and joy and fear warring within me. "You disappeared. You left me with this compass and no explanation." Pain crossed his weathered features. "There was no time. They were breaking through, and someone had to close the breach from the other side." His eyes pleaded for understanding. "I thought I could return once the seal was established, but the energies were too strong. I've been trapped there, maintaining the boundary, waiting for the moment when you would be ready to take up your heritage." "The Pathfinder awakening," Elder Thorne said, having approached from the perimeter. "He needs you to complete the ritual, child. To fully activate your abilities and repair the breach properly." My father nodded, relief evident as he recognized an ally. "Yes. The ritual. Quickly, before they break through completely." He gestured toward the widening tear, where the shadowy forms were becoming more distinct. Elongated, writhing shapes with too many limbs and glowing eyes that burned with malevolent intelligence. Nathaniel's hand found mine, warm and steady. "Alice," he said softly, "this is your choice, your destiny. But whatever you decide, I am with you." I looked from him to my father, to the breach that threatened to allow nightmares into our world, and knew there was only one possible decision. My entire life, the sense of something missing, the compass that never worked properly, the emptiness that no conventional path had filled, had been leading me to this moment, this choice. "Tell me what to do," I said to my father, drawing strength from Nathaniel's unwavering presence at my side. Relief flooded my father's exhausted face. "The ritual requires blood freely given and true intent," he explained, withdrawing a small, curved blade from within his tattered clothing. "Your blood on the compass will activate its full power, allowing you to perceive and manipulate the boundaries between realms." I took the knife with steady hands, the weight of the moment lending me a calm I wouldn't have believed possible just days ago. "And then? Then you must envision the boundary as it should be, whole, impermeable. Your will, channeled through the compass, will restructure reality itself." His eyes, so like my own, held a mixture of pride and sorrow. "But Alice, the breach has grown too large to be sealed from this side alone. Someone must cross over to complete the seal from the shadow realm." Understanding dawned, cold and clear. "That's why you never came back. You've been maintaining the seal from the other side all this time." He nodded gravely. "It was the only way. And now?" He glanced at the writhing shadows pressing ever closer to the breach. "Now I can no longer hold them back alone. The seal must be remade, stronger than before, by blood of the same line working from both sides of the boundary." "No," Nathaniel growled, the alpha in his voice unmistakable. "I will not allow her to be trapped as you were." My father turned to him, respect and understanding in his worn face. "You have found your Luna at last, Alpha King. I do not ask you to surrender her lightly, but the choice is not yours to make. It is hers, as it has always been." Both men looked to me, their expressions so different yet united in concern for my welfare. Around us, the warriors of Nathaniel's pack had formed a tight circle, weapons ready as the breach continued to widen and the pressure of malevolent entities seeking entry grew more palpable. In that moment, staring at the tier between worlds, feeling the dual pull of my heritage, Pathfinder and Luna both, I understood what Elder Thorne had meant about completion rather than loss. These aspects of myself weren't separate from who I had always been. They were the missing pieces that would make me whole. "There has to be another way," I said, my mind racing. "A way to seal the breach without either of us being trapped on the other side." "The original Pathfinders worked in pairs," Elder Thorn said suddenly, her ancient eyes bright with realization. "One on each side of a boundary, yes, but connected through their shared blood and purpose. The texts speak of the bridge of souls that allowed them to maintain seals without permanent separation." My father stared at her, hope flaring in his exhausted face. "The bridge of souls, of course. But it requires an anchor in this realm, a power source strong enough to sustain the connection across the boundary." "The Alpha-Luna bond," Nathaniel said, understanding immediately. "If Alice completes both awakenings, Pathfinder and Luna, our combined energy could serve as that anchor." "Two rituals at once?" Elder Thorn looked alarmed. "It has never been attempted. The strain could be too great. We don't have a choice," I said, watching as the shadowy entities pressed more insistently against the weakening boundary. "And we don't have time for debate." With a silent prayer to whatever forces might be listening, I drew the curved blade across my palm, wincing at the sharp pain. Blood welled immediately, bright red against my skin. I pressed the compass firmly into the wound, feeling the warm metal grow suddenly hot, almost vibrating with power. "For the Pathfinder awakening," my father intoned formally. "Blood freely given, purpose clearly seen, boundaries made visible to she who stands between." The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The world around me shattered into multiple overlapping realities. Not just our world and the shadow realm, but glimpses of others beyond, each with its own rules and resonance. I gasped, nearly falling to my knees as my perception expanded beyond anything human experience had prepared me for. Nathaniel caught me, his strong arms keeping me upright as the initial shock subsided. Through the kaleidoscope of realities, I saw him with new eyes, the golden energy that surrounded him, the deep well of power that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, the invisible bonds that connected him to each member of his pack. "The Luna awakening," he said softly, understanding without being told what needed to happen next. "Are you certain, Alice?" "Yes," I breathed, more certain than I had been of anything in my life. "I'm ready." His golden eyes held mine as he lifted my still bleeding hand to his lips. "For the Luna awakening," he said formally. "Blood freely shared, souls forever paired, the balance restored between strength and compassion." Instead of the bite I had expected, he pressed his lips to my wound in a kiss that sent electricity through my entire body. When he raised his head, I saw that he had drawn a small amount of my blood into his mouth. With deliberate movements, he bit his own wrist, then pressed our wounds together, allowing our blood to mingle. The effect was instantaneous and transformative. Where the Pathfinder awakening had expanded my perception, the Luna awakening set my soul on fire. I felt every member of the pack as though they were extensions of myself, felt Nathaniel's presence merge with mine in a bond so profound it defied description. It wasn't mental or physical, but something deeper, a recognition at the level of essence, a completion that filled every empty space inside me. Through it all, the compass continued to pulse with power, responding to both awakenings simultaneously. My father watched with a mixture of awe and pride as the dual energies surged through me, transforming me into something that had never existed before. Both Pathfinder and Luna, bridge between worlds and balance to the Alpha King. "Now," my father urged, gesturing toward the breach where the shadow entities had begun to push limbs through into our world. "Envision the boundary as it should be. Use your will to reshape reality." Drawing on both new aspects of myself, I focused on the tier between worlds. Through my Pathfinder vision, I could see the complex energies that formed the natural boundary between realms, a latticework of light and vibration that had been torn and frayed. Through my Luna senses, I could feel the imbalance this created, the wrongness of entities from one realm forcing their way into another. With Nathaniel's strength flowing through our newly formed bond, I extended my will toward the breach. The compass in my hand blazed with light, responding to my dual nature and amplified intention. My father mirrored my actions from the other side, his own compass glowing in harmony with mine. "The Bridge of Souls," he called, extending his free hand toward me across the dimensional divide. "Take my hand, Alice, and neither of us need remain trapped." Understanding intuitively what needed to happen, I reached out. The moment our fingers touched, a circuit completed. Power surged between us, between the twin compasses, between Nathaniel and me. A perfect triangle of energy that illuminated the tier from both sides simultaneously. "Now!" my father commanded. "Envision it whole." Together, we pushed our combined will against the breach. I imagined the latticework of energy rewoven, stronger than before, impermeable to the entities that sought entry. The compass grew almost unbearably hot in my hand, channeling more power than it was ever meant to contain as it drew from both my Pathfinder heritage and the Alpha Luna bond. Reality itself seemed to groan, resisting our efforts to reshape it. The shadow entities screeched in protest, their limbs withdrawing as the breach began to close from both ends simultaneously. My father's face strained with effort, decades of holding the boundary alone, evident in every line of his exhausted features. "It's working," Elder Thorn called from behind us. "The breach is closing." Indeed, the tier was shrinking rapidly, the overlapping realities beginning to separate properly once more. But as it narrowed, I felt my connection to my father weakening, the bridge of souls stretching thin as the dimensional divide reasserted itself. "Dad!" I cried, gripping his hand more tightly. "I can't hold the connection." "Let me go, Alice," he said, his voice calm, despite the closing breach that threatened to separate us once more. "Complete the seal." "No!" I refused, pouring more of myself into maintaining the bridge, even as I worked to close the breach. "I won't lose you again. Not when I've just found you." Nathaniel stepped closer, his energy merging more fully with mine as he placed his hand over our joined ones. "Take strength from me," he said, his voice resonant with power. "From us. From the pack." I felt it then. Not just Nathaniel's strength, but the combined energy of the entire pack flowing through him into me, reinforcing the bridge of souls even as the breach continued to close. My father's eyes widened as he felt it too, this unprecedented alliance of werewolf pack and Pathfinder working in concert. "Pull him through," Elder Thorn urged. "Quickly, before the seal is complete." With a final surge of combined will, I pulled my father toward our side of the rapidly closing breach. For a terrifying moment, he seemed caught between realities, half in the shadow realm, half in ours. Then, with a sound like air rushing to fill a vacuum, the breach sealed completely, and my father tumbled forward into our world, solid and real, and finally home. The abrupt closure of the breach sent a shockwave of energy rippling outward. I staggered, the dual awakening and enormous expenditure of power suddenly catching up to me. Nathaniel caught me as my knees buckled, sweeping me into his arms as darkness crowded the edges of my vision. The last thing I saw before consciousness faded was my father being helped to his feet by Mira and Elder Thorn, his exhausted face transformed by a smile of pure joy and relief. I awoke in my chambers at the compound, sunlight streaming through the windows to indicate that at least a day had passed. Nathaniel sat beside the bed, his powerful frame somehow managing to look both regal and vulnerable as he watched over me. His golden eyes lit up when he saw me stir. "Welcome back," he said softly, taking my hand in his. The contact sent a pleasant shiver through me, the bond between us now a tangible thing. A warm current of energy and emotion flowing back and forth. I could feel his relief, his joy at my awakening, and beneath it, a love so profound it took my breath away. "My father?" I asked, memories of the boundary and the sealing of the breach flooding back. "Recovering well," Nathaniel assured me. "Elder Thorn has taken him under her care. 10 years in the shadow realm have left their mark, but she believes he will heal completely in time." Relief washed through me. My father was alive, was here, was safe. After a decade of wondering and grief, of searching for answers, I had found more than I could have imagined possible. But I had found something else, too. Something I hadn't known I was seeking until I stumbled into Nathaniel's forest. As if reading my thoughts, he reached out to brush a strand of blonde hair from my face, his touch reverent. "You succeeded where no one else could have," he said. "Pathfinder and Luna both. A combination of powers that saved not just your father, but potentially our entire world from shadow entities that have sought entry for centuries. We did it together, I corrected, feeling the truth of it in the bond that hummed between us. All of us. You, me, my father, the pack. It took all of us. A smile warmed his golden eyes. Indeed. And that perhaps is the greatest lesson in all of this, that true strength comes not from isolation or independence, but from connection and balance. His expression grew more serious. How do you feel? The dual awakening was unprecedented. Elder Thorn was concerned about possible side effects. I took a moment to assess myself, to feel the changes that had taken place during that momentous convergence at the boundary. The Pathfinder abilities hummed quietly in the background of my awareness, not the overwhelming cacophony of overlapping realities I had experienced initially, but a subtle expansion of perception that I sensed could be accessed more fully when needed. The Luna aspect was more constant, a warm current of connection to Nathaniel, and through him to every member of the pack, a sense of belonging unlike anything I had ever known. I feel whole, I said finally, the simple word encompassing the profound transformation I had undergone, like parts of me that were always meant to be awake have finally opened their eyes. Relief and joy washed through Nathaniel, transmitted clearly across our bond. Then the risk was worth taking. More than worth it, I agreed, sitting up carefully. My body felt strange, stronger, more sensitive, with energy coursing just beneath the surface of my skin. When can I see my father? As soon as you're ready, Nathaniel said, helping me to my feet with gentle hands. He's been asking for you since he woke. The reunion with my father was everything I had dreamed of for 10 years, and more than I could have imagined. We held each other for long minutes, neither of us able to speak through tears of joy. When we finally separated enough to talk, he told me of his decade in the Shadow Realm, of the constant battle to maintain the seal, of the entities that sought to break through, of how thoughts of me had kept him sane through the long, dark years of his exile. I never stopped believing you would find the way, he said, his weathered face alight with pride, that the compass would eventually guide you where you needed to be. To Nathaniel, I said, understanding now the complex web of destiny that had brought me to this place, to these people, to the pack, to yourself. My father corrected gently. The compass always points to where you belong, Alice. I told you that. But where you belong isn't just a place. It's a state of being. Your true self, fully realized. In the weeks that followed, I divided my time between reconnecting with my father, learning to control my new abilities, and settling into my role as Luna of Nathaniel's pack. The dual nature of my awakening made me unique among his people. But rather than setting me apart, it seemed to inspire a new era of openness and adaptation in a society that had remained largely unchanged for centuries. Under Elder Thorn's guidance, my father began training me in the finer points of Pathfinder skills, how to perceive boundaries without being overwhelmed, how to identify weaknesses in the fabric between realms, how to move through the world with awareness of what lay beyond ordinary perception. His strength returned gradually, the white of his hair remaining as a permanent reminder of his ordeal, but his spirit brightening with each passing day. Mira, surprisingly, became one of my strongest allies in integrating into pack life. Her initial coolness had given way to respect after witnessing my role in sealing the breach, and she took it upon herself to ensure that other pack members accepted me, not just as their king's mate, but as a leader in my own right. The pack feels different, she commented one afternoon as we walked through the compound. More harmonious. It's been so long since we had a Luna that many had forgotten what true balance feels like. I had felt it too, the subtle shift in energy as my presence affected the connections between pack members, soothing tensions and strengthening bonds that had grown brittle over time. It wasn't something I did consciously, but rather an automatic function of what I now was. And then there was Nathaniel. The bond between us deepened daily. A connection so profound, it transcended simple categories like love or partnership. We were two halves of a whole, complementary forces that created something greater together than either could achieve alone. In private moments, He showed me a gentleness that few in the pack ever witnessed, a capacity for wonder and joy that centuries of solitary rule had never fully extinguished. "You've changed me," he admitted one night as we stood on the balcony outside our now shared chambers, gazing at the stars. "Not just through the bond, but by showing me another way to see the world. To lead." "We've changed each other," I corrected, leaning into the solid warmth of him. "That's what balance is about. Mutual transformation, not dominance or submission." He smiled, pressing a kiss to my temple. "Wisdom from my Luna, another gift I never expected." 3 months after my fateful hike into Nathaniel's territory, we gathered the entire pack for a formal ceremony, not just to recognize me as their Luna, which had already occurred, but to announce a new initiative. Together with my father and Elder Thorn, we had developed a program to identify and train potential pathfinders among humans, to rebuild that ancient lineage and strengthen the boundaries between realms. For too long, our worlds have existed in isolation from each other. Nathaniel addressed the assembled pack, his voice carrying easily across the compound's central gathering space. Werewolves hiding from humans, pathfinders reduced to legend, boundaries between realms growing weak from neglect. Today, we begin a new chapter, one of careful connection rather than complete separation. I stood beside him, feeling the rightness of our shared vision through the bond that connected us. What had begun as an accidental stumbling into his pack had become a deliberate choice to bridge worlds, not just between human and werewolf, not just between ordinary reality and the shadow realm, but between past and future, between what had always been and what could yet be. Later that night, as Nathaniel and I walked through the moonlit forest that had first brought us together, he stopped suddenly, turning to face me with an expression of wonder that never failed to touch my heart. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, golden eyes searching mine. "The changes, the responsibilities, the life you left behind?" I considered the question seriously, thinking of the small apartment I had once called home, the mundane jobs I had struggled to maintain, the sense of drifting that had characterized my existence before that fateful hike. Compared to the richness of what I had found, my father restored to me, my true nature awakened, a bond with Nathaniel that filled every empty space in my soul, and a purpose that united all aspects of myself. There was no contest. "No," I said simply, reaching up to touch his face, feeling our bond pulse with shared emotion. "The compass always points to where you belong. This is where I belong, who I belong with, who I was always meant to be." He smiled, drawing me close as the moon rose higher, bathing the forest in silver light. Around us, the pack moved quietly through the trees, some in human form, others as wolves, all connected in a harmony that had been missing for centuries. Among them was my father, his white hair gleaming in the moonlight as he conversed with Elder Thorn about boundary maintenance techniques. In that moment, surrounded by the family I had found, and the one I had recovered, I understood that the true power of both Pathfinder and Luna lay not in the abilities themselves, but in what they represented. The capacity to connect, to bridge, to bring balance to forces that would otherwise remain separated or in conflict. It was a lesson the world beyond these forests sorely needed, and one that Nathaniel and I, together with our unusual pack of boundary crossers, were uniquely positioned to teach. The compass at my throat, no longer a mystery, but a symbol of my heritage and purpose, rested warm against my skin. Its needle pointed steadfastly toward Nathaniel, confirming what my heart had already learned. That sometimes, finding where you belong means not a place, but a person. Not a destination, but a journey shared. And as the Alpha King who had searched for his Luna for centuries drew me closer beneath the watching moon, I knew that our story was not ending, but truly beginning, a tale of boundaries crossed, worlds bridged, and souls finally, perfectly, found.
Along the front of glasses or sunglasses all the time, every time you blink. Oh no, not the one, the pecking typing. This is terrible. Oh, I've got eyelashes, look at me. Sorry. Okay, humble brag. Yes, Dia knew that I touch type before sending. Yes. I could never type without seeing the letters and studying them and double checking before I click. Yeah. Yeah. They're not greasy. No, they just scratch against the front. Not comfortable, not comfortable. Okay. Attention. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma, you may be entitled to financial compensation. What's happened to me? What just happened to me? Attention, if your loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Mesothelioma is a rare... What? I've been turbo-encabulated! Mesothelioma. Attention, if your loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma. Mesothelioma, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Mesothelioma is a rare cancer linked to asbestos crabomination. Asbestos exposure to asbestos in the Navy, shipyards, mills, heating, construction, or the automotive industries may put you at risk. Please don't wait. Call 1-800-99-LAW-USA today for a free legal consultation and financial information packet. Mesothelioma patients, call now. 1-800-99-LAW-USA. We've discovered her kryptonite. Mesothelioma. Fuck. Not like this. Asbestos. Asbestos. Fuck. This is going to ruin the tour. Damn it. Foodie, I had to read the whole damn encabulator reference earlier. Just terrible. I couldn't believe it was her. It was like a dream. But there she was, just as I remembered her. That delicately beautiful face, and a body that could melt a cheese sandwich from across the room. And breasts that seemed to say, "Hey, look at these." She was the kind of woman who made you want to drop to your knees and thank God you were a man. She reminded me of my mother. All right. No doubt about it. I was saying it aloud with you. I kept expecting the word mesothelioma to have more syllables, oddly enough. Yeah.